Hi everybody, this is Lainey at Hilltop Home Place. This evening I decided to can some bone broth. I had taken a turkey out of my freezer probably Sunday. Now this is Friday, but it took about 2 days for the turkey to thaw. I usually just let it kind of thaw in my refrigerator. I'll set it out on my counter a few hours if I'm going to be in my kitchen and doing things. I'll go ahead and set it out here. I don't leave it there like all day long though. I usually kind of, for the majority of the time, just let it slowly defrost in my refrigerator. So Tuesday night, I decided to go ahead and cook it. And I normally, you see my roaster that's up there on top of my refrigerator? It's one of those big roasters, like you can get at Walmart or wherever. And it's got a little rack thing in the bottom. And I have just learned to do my turkeys in that. It's easy. It's simple, really. You literally just wash your turkey really good, take the neck and any of the gizzards and stuff that are in the package that's stuffed down into the cavity of the turkey, just take all that out. I take my turkey after it's washed and all, I take it, put it in the roaster, and I just liberally sit there and sprinkle it with whatever I want. A lot of times I just sprinkle it with Tony Chachere's, and I go ahead and open up kind of the cavity, hold the turkey to where you can see down into that cavity, and liberally sprinkle whatever you're going to use down in that cavity as well, because that helps season the meat from the other side, from the inside of the bird out. So that's what I normally do. I might also sprinkle on there a little garlic powder. I might sprinkle some salt and pepper or some soul seasoning, which is just kind of like this Tony Chachere's, except it doesn't have all the red peppers in it. It doesn't have to be a lot. It can be just one thing, like the Tony Chachere's. It could be just that. It could be just salt and pepper. But just liberally shake it all over it. Get your whole bird, lift up the little wings, get up under the wings and everywhere, and liberally season your bird all over. And then you put it in the roaster, you shut the lid. I really don't do anything else. I used to put butter up in the middle of my cavities when I was cooking the birds and everything. I don't even really do that anymore. I just put it in the roaster, put the lid on the roaster, plug it in, and I put it on 325. And in an hour and a half, that turkey is ready. Its bones are disjointing, they're falling apart. I turn it off and let it cool for a little while, and then I go ahead and debone it. Now, if you're trying to make a turkey as a beautiful presentation piece at Thanksgiving or something, this is probably not the best way to cook it, because this just kind of goes at it and gets the thing done. It doesn't preserve all your skin really pretty. It doesn't do things like that to where you would platter this up and show this beautiful bird. It literally kind of, I don't tie the legs, I don't do anything. I just want it cooked, because what I do is I want the meat off the bones. That's normally, even at Thanksgiving, that's normally what I do. I go ahead and debone large pieces of meat, and I put that on a platter and just have the platter of meat sitting there, and I'll reserve the carcass and everything to make bone broth with later. What I normally do at Thanksgiving though is I go ahead and buy a couple of turkeys extra. I wait till they go on sale around Thanksgiving. I'll get one for Thanksgiving, and then I'll get a couple of more, put them in my freezer. And I had this one, I think I only bought one extra this year, so I had this one. And so I decided to take it out Sunday evening and start thawing it, to just, for whatever reason. I didn't have a reason to do this. I just wanted to kind of clear it out of my freezer. And then I normally, when I debone it, I usually end up with like 4 quart Ziplocs of meat, pretty full bags of meat. I don't do it in gallon Ziplocs, because when I'm going to just cook a casserole and all, the amount of meat, which is 2 cups or more, that's in a quart Ziplocs is usually plenty for whatever casserole I'm making. So I do it in quart Ziplocs, and I end up with 4 of them. And to me, that's wonderful, because that means for 4 different nights, just whenever, months from now or whenever, I will have turkey meat I can pull out and use in a casserole, and it's so handy. I got the bird on sale, and then I have 4 quarts of meat I can use, but also I can take the carcass and take those gizzards and everything that you got out of the cavity to begin with, and I can put all that right back into the roaster, like take the turkey out to debone it and then put everything right back in it. And I also, this time, had 2 Ziplocs of things in my freezer from Thanksgiving and everything. I had the carcass of the other turkey. I had parts of onions that I had just chopped here, there, and yonder. I always kind of have a Ziploc going in my freezer, And if I'm chopping an onion, you cut the end off, when you're chopping it. Take those ends, take those peelings, and put them in a Ziploc in your freezer. And then when you're going to do the broth from the turkey and all, you just dump all that in there. You can dump it in frozen if you wanted to, but I did take mine out a little bit early and let it kind of get room temperature, let it thaw. And then I added that to my roaster with my turkey carcass. To cook broth, though, out of all these bones and everything, you do put them back in your roaster, but then you need to pour some water over it. Just pour water. I usually just go ahead and fill my roaster about at least 3/4 full, and it covers all the bones and everything. You get those onions, all push it down in there and get it all down. But you put water, just regular water, because when you cook the turkey, it doesn't make all this broth. You have to add water to all those bones, water to all your turkey parts that you're putting back in there. And everything I'm saying can apply for chickens as well, or any other kind of birds you cook. You can even mix all these types of bones. I don't think it matters. You're basically taking these bones that you've used and you've roasted with them. You've either cooked them in your oven or in your roaster. Put them back in the roaster is how I do it. Cover them with water really well, about 3/4 of your roaster full. And then, even though I had seasoned my bird, and even though some of that may have permeated, into all of this, it's not enough for me. Some people don't do anything. They don't season their broth, and what they'll do is season it when they take it all out and cook, and depending on what they're going to put it in. But I've just found that no matter what I'm cooking, I always need extra seasoning because this broth is too bland. So what I do is when I put it in the roaster, I put the water in the roaster, I go ahead and take a little Tony Chachere's and a good deal of salt. I'll liberally sprinkle salt all across the top of that broth, and then I'll stir that all in. And I've just found that I would rather have a seasoned broth. That's just me. Some people, if you're low on salt, you're low on sodium, you don't like all that, then just don't add it and wait till you're cooking with this broth and adjust then. But I've always just found I want my broth to be seasoned so that when I am cooking later, it automatically kind of permeates into what I'm cooking, and I don't have to add a lot of salt at that point. So that's what I do, and I turn it on 220, and I let mine just cook all night long. So it cooked 10 hours or so before I woke up the next morning and cut it off. And it smelled delicious, and I'm here to tell you it came out delicious. I really, really enjoyed it. But I used some of my broth. I was going to can it all, but I used some of it already. So I don't have a whole lot left, but I'm still going to go ahead and can what I do have, because I do like to have some on the shelf stable for when I need it. And I never know when I'm going to need it. I took some of my broth the other day and I made some chicken and dumplings. Even though it's turkey, I still call them chicken and dumplings. I made some homemade dumplings, used the broth, and then added in some of that turkey meat and made some turkey and dumplings, I guess you'd say, and took that to my neighbor. And then I made another batch of it, and I took some to my mom, and then I kept some for me to eat, and I ate it for supper last night. And oh my gosh, I don't know what it was, if it's been this weather or what, but that hit the spot last night. I usually fix what I want when I go to sit down and eat, and I don't go back for seconds a lot and stuff. But last night I went back for seconds for some of those turkey and dumplings. It was so good, and it just I don't know, it just made me feel good last night just eating it. The broth was delicious. Maybe it was that bone broth and those nutrients. I don't know. The turkey meat was delicious, and then the dumplings came out good. So what I have left, I'm going to can this evening, and I'll just show you how I do it. It's so easy. The making of the broth, I guess, is the harder part, though it's really not hard at all if you use a roaster, and you don't have to stand there and watch it or worry about it boiling over like if you did it on your stove. You're just putting it in the roaster and putting the lid on, and that's that. But that's the harder part, if you want to call it that. The canning it isn't that hard. But I thought I would just show you this evening how I do it. And if you can get started making your own bone broth, that is a blessing. Every time I go to the store now, I don't even look at the Swanson stuff. I don't look at anything. I just know that I have 10 times better broth at home that I made myself, and I don't have to buy it at the store anymore. That's one less thing I'm dependent on that store for. So let's get going, and I'll show you what I do. Whenever I do the broth in my roaster, when it's finished, I go ahead and pour it through a sifter into a pot. I put the sifter, it kind of hooks on top of this pot, and I just pour it through the sifter before it goes in the pot. And then I put it in the refrigerator. And when you do that, some of the fats in the broth will solidify on the top of your broth. And I always like to skim that off before I actually boil this and prepare to can it. The fats can get a little more rancid in things quicker if they're in the things that you can. So you kind of want to eliminate that threat. You kind of want to just get these fats off of there and put them in a little bowl. You can throw that away. A lot of people have chickens and things they'll feed it to, but I don't. So skim as much of this off as possible. You don't have to be perfect. You're never going to get every little drop of it out of there, but always just kind of skim it with a spoon, discard it, and then start boiling your broth. You want to do this while it's still cold and while that fat has floated to the top. What you're left with is the brown broth. It looks so good. It looks a little gelatinous. It looks really good. I'm going to go ahead and reach up here and turn my stove on. I want to get this to where it'll start boiling pretty quickly. And then while I'm doing that, I'm going to go ahead and start washing my dishes. This is the good part though. You're getting going. It's not going to take that long before this really good broth is going to be in my canner. My canner will hold 8 wide mouth pint jars. It'll hold 9 regular mouth, but I'm running low on lids for my regular mouth. So I'm going to use these wide mouth. I'm going to wash these in just a second with the lids and with the rings. And then I'm going to put the jars themselves straight into an oven set on 215 degrees because they need to be hot before I put that hot broth into them. So I'm going to get those washed and then put them in the oven, and it's all going to kind of come together at the same time. This might be a strange thing to say, but this whole turkey business was a God thing. When I took it out Sunday, I just kind of did it spur of the moment. Didn't really have any, need to get this turkey out and start fooling with it. But Tuesday night, right after I had taken it out of the roaster and deboned it, I got a text from a neighbor, and they were having some trouble. They had had some surgery, they have some sickness. They needed a little bit of sustenance and didn't have the energy to do it for themselves. So they asked me if I knew how to make chicken and dumplings. I said I do, and I happen to have just deboned a turkey, and I have all this broth I'm making. So I got up the next morning, Wednesday morning, and this is what I used, this broth and this turkey, to make them a pan of the chicken and dumplings, really turkey and dumplings. So that was a God thing. But then also, as these days have rolled out the last couple of days, we've had a lot of sadness in our country with that plane crash and just other things going on. And it's like, to me, being able to do this broth this afternoon was not just a task. It wasn't just me trying to just take care of something so I could have food on the shelf. I really kind of fall back and do things like this to kind of bring me some peace, I guess you would say. My hands are busy, my thoughts are busy. You have to concentrate so you don't miss a step when you're canning. And it just kind of helps me a little bit to feel like I'm doing something proactive at a time when I feel like I don't have a whole lot of influence on things in the world. I can kind of feel like, well, at least in my little portion of the world, I have some control. And I can put some food back, some healthy food, some food that'll save us money, some food that'll nourish us. And I don't know why it's a simple little thing, but I tend to work in my kitchen and do things like this when I'm feeling like the world is a little bit chaotic and a little bit out of reach for me to help anybody and for me to do anything for anybody in some of these situations. And I just kind of go into myself and I start working and I start canning and I start cleaning my house and taking care of business around our house, but it makes me feel a little bit in control. Do you ever feel this way? What do you think about that? Do you do things like this to feel in control? I know I do. I'm going ahead and getting my lids and rims washed, and I'll just leave them laying on a clean towel until I need them. You don't have to put them in boiling water anymore, per the Canning Association rules, and I don't. That's just one less thing I have to worry about. I do need to go ahead and put water in my canner though. Mine is a Presto canner and it calls for 3 quarts, which is 12 cups. I go ahead and put that, and then I usually add a couple of more cups. I usually just kind of shoot for 14 cups. You do what's best for you with your canner. Everybody's canners are different, and I'm just talking today about how I can. So you need to read your rules and do it according to what you think. But mine just tends to work better if I add a couple more cups to mine. So I go with about 14 cups. A little metal grate comes with your canner. Always make sure it's in the bottom of your canner. It keeps your jars from sitting on the very bottom, so you always need to make sure you've got that in place before you start. I'm going to set this canner on a medium-high heat, like maybe 4 to 6, and get that water warming up. You want to have your water warm as this process starts. I'll tell you why. When you're dealing with boiling broth, you want to be able to put that boiling broth straight into a hot jar, not a cold jar, because your jars can crack if you put a hot liquid into a cold jar. So you want your broth hot, your jars hot, and you want the water that you're fixing to set those jars in to be very, very warm and steaming before you put it in there. So that's why you need to go ahead and turn your fire on and get that water heating up. Hot, hot, hot. Just always remember that. If you're doing something cold, you need cold, cold, cold. But for this process, we need hot, hot, and hot of all 3 things. These Presto canners have a rubber gasket that goes on the inside of your lid, and you have to keep them oiled to make sure that when you're putting your lid on the canner, everything is able to move easily and seal. That's an important process. There's a little groove on the inside of the gasket, and that's where we're going to oil it. Let me show you how I do it. It's a very, very simple process. It's not hard at all. I just take some olive oil, I put it on a little paper towel, and then you can just kind of hold the paper towel in place. You don't have to move it. And just kind of use your finger to push it into the groove, and then just drag the gasket over it. You can just drag that gasket in a big circle and pull it over your towel. And that's all you have to do, and the whole inside of it will be greased. It's a simple process. Then you just put it on the inside of your lid. You make sure it's flat to the bottom and it's tight against all the sides. It's very, very easy. There's one little place where they have just a little check thing, and you have to make sure your gasket is under that. It can't be above that, but it should be. It'll be flat all the way around. Not a problem at all. This broth is fixing to be at a full rolling boil. It's boiling underneath the surface. I'm going to get my little work area here set up. I'm going to put a double towel on it to make sure nothing burns my laminate. And then my utensils over here, I'm getting ready. This is my jar holders. I'll use this to pull the jars out of the hot oven and set them on the towel. And then I'll use them again to put the jars into the pot and out of the pot later. This is my ladle I'm going to use for my broth to put it in my jars. And I'll be putting it straight into this funnel, this green funnel, which you always need to use when you're canning because you're dealing with these hot liquids and you want it to go straight in your jar and not all over your cabinet and everything. So that comes in handy. This is what I normally use to debubble things. I use this little end of it right here instead of the spatula end, but I'm not really having to debubble today because I'm dealing with liquids. So I'm just going to put that to the side. I got it out of habit, but I really don't need it today. I'm going to be putting about 2 cups of broth in each of these pint jars. It makes me feel so smart when I do this because when you think about it, I paid $1.19 a pound for this turkey. I can't remember exactly what it weighed, but I think I paid between like $14 and $15 for this turkey. And I got 4 bags of meat out of it that I can use. Say I made a casserole with one of those bags of meat. Richard and I can eat off that casserole for 2 nights for sure, Plus, I can probably have lunches from it. Multiply that times 4. So that's at least 8 nights of eating off of this turkey, not counting some lunches and little extras, that you might have little leftovers or whatever. That's a lot of meals from one turkey for $15. But on top of that, I'm getting 8 pints of broth, not counting the broth that I already used to cook with for the other meals. That was broth I didn't have to buy for the chicken and dumplings I made for the neighbors and for myself. That was broth I didn't have to buy. This is 8 pints on top of that. And at the end of this, I'm probably going to have some left over because I had a lot in this pot. But I can only hold 8 jars in my canner. And I just don't think I'm going to run another thing for another pint or two. I'm not going to worry about it. I'll just think of something I can make with that extra here shortly. But that's a lot. That's a lot. Now, if I had animals, animals that could use some of these bones and byproduct, that would be even better. I'll probably just throw them in the garbage. But for a $15 turkey, I'm getting a lot of bang for my buck. And it makes me feel so smart when that happens, because you feel like you've done a lot for your budget, for your family, to have healthy food. And it just really makes me feel like I'm managing my household when I do things like this. Let me know what you think. How do you feel when you can? How do you feel when you put up food? Does it make you feel proud? And I don't think that's a sinful way of feeling proud. I think that's a satisfying way of feeling proud, because you've taken the things that you've been given and blessed with, like some money, like the ability to go to the store or to buy a product, and you've not wasted it. You've put that money into something that is actually going to feed you many, many, many more nights. And that's fantastic. You don't get that by buying a bag of chips. You don't get that by going through Popeyes. You're getting a lot of more meals for a little bit of effort. And I just feel like that makes me proud and makes me feel smart. Let me know what you think. What kind of feelings do you get when you can, or when you preserve, or when you put up things or buy things that really, really stretch and that really, really feed you for a long, long time? Let me know what you think. I'm going to go ahead and put this lid on, and you want to make sure that the little V that's on top of your pot lines up with the V that's on the handle. Once you line those up, your pot lid will settle down the way it's supposed to onto the pot, and then all you have to do is twist it and it locks. If you don't have those V's lined up, it won't. That's for my canner though. Yours might be different. I turned my fire up to medium high, and when the steam starts coming out of that top part, I'm going to turn my timer to 10 minutes. And you let it vent out of that little hole and have steam coming rising out of there really fast for 10 minutes. And then you're ready to put your little knob on there. I'll show you that in just a second. Okay, once you have steam coming out like this, you set your timer on 10 minutes and you let it vent out for 10 minutes. Once it vents out for 10 minutes, you set your little gauge on the top. When it starts dancing, you can actually start timing your broth to cook your broth, but not until it starts dancing. I should have addressed this before. This little gauge is set at 10 pounds weight. You see the bigger circle, the bigger silver circle? That's actually a separate little weight that's sitting on this. The gauge itself is rated at 5 pounds. When you set that bigger circle weight there around the middle of it, you've got it at 10 pounds. If I wanted to put another weight just like that on it, it would make it 15-pound weight. It's just a canning terminology, and it all depends on the altitude that you live at as to what you need the pounds to put this on. I live at 0 to 1,000, so I have to do it on the 10-pound weight. Refer to your canning books for this little chart. Depending on what altitude you live at, I live in the coastal part of Louisiana. We're at 0 to 1,000 feet. Mine is 10 pounds. You live any higher than that, you're going to need the extra weight put on there for 15 pounds. The dial gauge that you see there is for a different type of canner than I have. You would actually have a little gauge you would look at to see what your pounds are, and you would have to keep monitoring it the whole time you're canning. I kind of like the weighted gauge because I really don't have to think about it the whole time I'm canning. Once it starts jingling, I know I'm good to go. And we have liftoff. I love to hear the sound of that jiggling and dancing. I'm going to set my timer on 25 minutes. The book actually says I only have to put it on 20 for pints, but I always run my canner 5 minutes more, no matter what I'm canning. That's just what I have to do for my canner. You need to learn your canner and do what's best for you. When it was finished, you know your canner has cooled down when your little button drops there on the side, and then you can take your gasket off. Now this might take about 45 minutes for it to cool down, so just be patient. Lift your lid carefully, turn it away from you in case there's any steam, and then I just set it in my sink. And I'm ready to take my jars out. This is 25 minutes after they cooked, and then, as I said, the pot cooled about 45 minutes. So it takes a little while, you just have to give it some time. But look at there, look how beautiful this broth is. And it's done, that's all I had to do. It's so much easier than doing vegetables and things because there's prep with vegetables. But with this broth, it's just not that bad at all. You just basically do it in your roaster, and then you just strain it to make sure you get a good clear broth without a lot of things in it. And then you're ready to can it. It's not that hard at all. It's easy to load in your jars. It's easy to put in your canner. It's just not that complicated to make your own good broth and never really be dependent on the store broth again. Once you do this too, you find that those things that you used to buy at the store are just not going to satisfy you anymore. You can tell the difference, you can taste the difference, and you can feel the difference. Believe it or not, the broth is just so nutritious for you. You can actually feel the difference, and you really won't ever go back. Well, there they are, 8 pints of pure gold. Wouldn't trade it for anything. If I've forgotten anything in this video to mention while I'm canning, I apologize. I did my best. But just ask me in the comments if there was anything that confused you or anything I might have just completely left out and forgot to tell you about. I'll be glad to talk about it. You get to going when you're filming these things, when you're cooking, and sometimes it's hard to remember everything, especially if it's something you kind of have done so many times that you're doing it without really thinking sometimes. But this is Lainey from Hilltop Home Place. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you make your own broths, and I hope you just enjoy cooking like this forever and making it a part of your life. Y'all have a wonderful, wonderful day and a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.